All right, let's bring in our friend Taylor Dahl, who hosts Helmets and Heels for 1010 down in Jacksonville, but also does a ton of Bears coverage and is dialed in on the Bears. And that's why we wanted to have you on with some Jacksonville, Chicago connections today that we need to discuss. How you doing, Taylor?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on again. It's always fun joining you guys. We talk a lot about you here in Jacksonville, actually, because I run our multimedia department, and the amount of times that I show videos of things that you guys do that I'm like, we could do something like this. Let's do this. So I appreciate all you guys do too. It's really fun.
Well, the last time I saw you, Taylor, we were at the corner of Wabash and Cermak getting ready for Bears Packers. So before we get into some of the stuff that we brought you on for is, obviously this was a very magical season, and we cover the team, but we're also Bears fans.
Yeah.
We don't have to hide from that. And I know you had a pretty epic video in the stands after DJ Moore's touchdown. So just kind of wanted to hear your memories of that, looking back on this season and looking back on that game.
Yeah, it was really fun. The whole experience anyways. The game was on my birthday, so it kind of ended up working out anyways, where as soon as the schedule came out, I was like, oh, Bears, Packers, and Chicago on my birthday. This couldn't get any more perfect, and it did because they won, so that added on to it. And then I ended up winning tickets from Javon Dexter on Twitter, so it just everything kind of pieced together for that game. But it was so much fun. I mean, there was a moment, obviously, when you're down and the Bears had only scored 6 at that point. I was freezing personally. I live in Florida and I've been in Florida for a long time. So I'm standing there and I look at my cousin and I was like, if I came up here to watch the Bears score 6 points and lose, I'm going to be so upset. And I mean, probably a minute later is when Janae Walker got that touchdown, and we looked at each other and I was like, okay, maybe so another miracle happens, and it did. But I don't know if I have ever experienced anything like that. And like being a Cubs fan, I went up to Chicago for Game 5, 3, 4, 5. I was up there Game 5 at Wrigley, and so I feel like you have these experiences, and that's kind of what reminds you why you love the team and why you love that sport. And that was one of those realization moments where I was like, this is something that I'll be able to talk about forever. And so, yeah, it was iconic. There was somebody in front of me, like Stone Cold Steve Austin, 2 beers together. So there's like beers flying. We're all standing up on our chairs. Like it was incredible.
Yeah. That's great. There's still, looking back on it, so many incredible memories from last season that, if we get as much as everybody wants.
It's too good of a season to move on from. Like, yeah. We're supposed to look to next year, but like the players and the coaches can do that. We can still remedy. Like it was too special of a season. I was just telling somebody yesterday, like most special seasons have 2 of those games. Mm-hmm. They had 8 of those games. That never happens.
So anyway, tell us about Press Taylor.
Yeah. There's Press. So I'll go back and we'll go back to the 2022 season, because I do want to start with some of the positives before I get into some of the concerns that I have. But you go back to 2022, and it was a weird season for the Jags. There were not a lot of expectations going into that. Obviously, the year before it was Urban Meyer, and that was just a complete disaster, and everything that could possibly go wrong went wrong with Urban Meyer and that Jags team. So you get into 2022, and there's kind of this, okay, what exactly is going to happen? Nobody really knew. The Jags ended up winning 6 of their 7 games at the end, get into the postseason. I know most people probably remember they have that game against the Chargers where they're down. I'm trying to even remember. It was like 27-7 or something like that. And then Jags come back, and Trevor Lawrence brings them back into the game. They end up beating the Chargers in the first round of the postseason. And so after that season, a lot of conversation was had of who was play calling. Was it Doug Peterson? Was it Press Taylor? And so there was a lot of back and forth from that. What we ended up hearing, and I don't know, this is just kind of reports that surfaced after that, was that Doug Peterson was play calling for the first half of games and Press Taylor was play calling for the second half of games. And the second half of games is when they had all these comebacks. It was kind of Bears-esque in that season, where they were losing a lot in the first half, and then they'd come back and they'd win, whether it was like a miracle interception against Dallas and then ended up going down and scoring and winning, or that Chargers game. So there was a lot of moments in that where we were like, oh, okay, well, Press Taylor kind of got a lot of these games and kind of reeled Trevor Lawrence in, because Trevor Lawrence also has been a roller coaster since he's got here too. This is probably the best season we've had of him. And so you were still trying to see what Trevor was. And down that final stretch, you really did start having hope, like, okay, this is this generational talent that everybody told you were getting out of Trevor Lawrence. And Press Taylor kind of reeled that out of him in second half of games down that stretch in 2022. And then so you go on and like the offseason happens, and things just start getting messy. I don't quite know what happens. And we kind of have this tale here where we would joke like Press Taylor got Doug Peterson fired twice. That's kind of the sentiment that is said around here, because they would never after that be honest. It was always like, who's play calling? And Doug would be like, well, we're not going to officially say who's play calling. And it was this weird secret, like gatekeeping for no reason. And nobody
never a good thing.
Yeah.
I've learned that whenever you don't know who's calling things and whose offense you're really running, it's not a good thing.
No, and it just got uncomfortable because then reporters are asking Trevor, and Trevor was like, I don't know. Whoever's calling, I'm ready to, run their offense, whatever the case may be. So it was putting Trevor in weird situations. The coaching staff, all of us just felt like we were just being lied to at this point, because it's like, I don't understand why you just don't want to say, hey, press is calling plays, which it does. From other reports since then, it does seem like Press Taylor was the one play calling, and Doug, for whatever reason, didn't ever really want to say that, and they wanted to keep it a secret. I don't know why. But you get into that 2023 season and things just kind of started to spiral. And in that sense, it's all those secrets, which doesn't help. But in addition to that, you just kind of started seeing Trevor regress in a lot of areas. His footwork started getting kind of messed up. He was overthrowing a lot, sailing a lot of passes. It was kind of the anticipation that you started seeing at the end of 2022 started lacking a little bit. He was running away from phantom pressures. Granted, there's a lot of things that tie into this. And you guys know, watching a lot of Bears football, there's other factors into what can make a quarterback successful and unsuccessful. And so there were a lot of things. The line wasn't really good. He was getting hit a lot. He was battling a ton of injuries during the time. He had, ankle and arm and ribs and everything you can think of within the last couple months of that 2023 season. He played through all of them, but he wasn't practicing every single week. It was like, limited or did not practice. Then he'd play on Sunday, and you're like, well, no wonder he's not playing really well. He hasn't practiced all week. And so there was this discussion of how much was it Press and Doug or whoever's calling plays, and how much was it just that Trevor was banged up and the line was bad and they couldn't run the ball. And so all of those things kind of factored into a lot of the stuff in 2023. And in 2024, it just got worse at that point. You saw Trevor to the point where people were like, okay, well, does Trevor need to be traded? Do you try and figure something out and go get a new quarterback? Because this just doesn't look like the quarterback that's going to save the franchise that we were talking about being this generational elite talent. And so a lot of things kind of started to regress at that point. And they already paid Trevor after that 2022 season. So you were kind of locked into that big contract with him. And so there was just a lot of factors there. But the hard part to even say is because we've never been told, like, Press Taylor was calling plays, or Press Taylor was specifically working on this, some of these fundamentals or mechanics with Trevor. They were just so secretive about whether it was Press or Doug in a lot of senses. And that's kind of, it's hard to determine what really it was. And one of the big things for me this last year when Liam Cohen comes here and Grant Udinski, they immediately, the first thing they talked to Trevor Lawrence about was like, hey, we're switching your feet. We need to switch your feet around. We need to flip your hips. I don't know why you've been throwing this way your whole career. And a lot of it, I think, is Trevor's just, the embodiment of what a quarterback should look like. And he has an arm, and like, it's always been kind of easy. So no one, I feel like, felt like they needed to correct anything, because he just won a lot of football games in high school and college. And then it kind of caught up to him in the NFL. And so that's one of my things too, is why I didn't Press Taylor or Doug Peterson, like quarterback guys, a former quarterback, and then Press Taylor working with him, didn't ever comment on that. And that's one of the first things Liam said. So I don't know. It's a weird control thing with Doug Peterson and Press. I don't know if we'll ever truly know what that dynamic looked like in Jacksonville, or how much was who, if it was 50-50, if it was what. But that's some of my concerns, just because I saw the regression of Trevor. It's just hard to pinpoint if it was Press or what else was going on.
Well, obviously, it's kind of a big mark for Press Taylor that Ben Johnson was willing to bring him onto his staff last year, right, as a passing game coordinator. Now he gets into the offensive coordinator role, but as we know, Ben Johnson calls the plays. So just curious from your perspective and kind of what we've learned here in the last couple months through different reporting of exactly what Declan Doyle's role was here in Chicago. And now you try to look at Press Taylor and see how he can join and jump into that role. How confident are you that will be a seamless transition? Because obviously the Bears had a fantastic season, and we're obviously looking for bigger and better and trying to get to a Super Bowl.
Yeah, and that's what, with all of the negative things I just said, I'll start with, like, I think this is fine, and part of that is because, number one, I trust Ben Johnson. I think we've seen that Ben Johnson's hirings he's nailed it. You lose a couple this year, you get poached already for your coaching staff that you've built, and so I trust him, and I also trust Caleb. And I'm sure, I don't know specifically, but I'm guessing Caleb should or hopefully was in on some of those conversations, and we've heard some of the madness of the year before with Waldron and how vocal he was about that not working. So to me, I feel like if they were confident enough to pull Press Taylor and make him the offensive coordinator, then conversations between Ben and Caleb had to have been had of what they think is best for this offense. And so that's part of it too. You talk about one of the comments that Cole Kmet, I think it was, made about the Declan Doyle was a big part of those halftime adjustments and some of the end game adjustments. And that's one of the things I just mentioned. We talked about Press Taylor actually being, that if that all the reports were true, being good at in Jacksonville is those halftime adjustments and game adjustments, and they started winning a lot of football games. So if you want the guy that you feel confident can come in and kind of take that role over, I think it will work. And I think Ben Johnson, he's a control freak. We know that. We see everything, and his perfectionist side kind of really gets out. It's a little crazy. I was looking at the playoffs, by the way. We went for the fourth down 12 times in the postseason. I was like, that's absolutely insane. But it gets a little wonky sometimes, but I trust Ben. And I think at the end of the day, that's where we have to be right now, because it doesn't feel like he's made any bad choice when it comes to the coaching staff. And obviously Jags and Bears kind of swapped, Shane Waldron being in Jacksonville, being the passing game coordinator. You kind of hear similar things here, that the work he's done with Trevor complimented Shane Waldron a lot. So sometimes maybe it's just the place. You need the dynamic between head coach and offensive coordinator has to click, and the quarterback has to be right, and all of those things. And so I'm just hoping that that's what we're looking at right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of that makes sense. First of all, Press Taylor was in the building last year. So the fact that Ben is promoting him, whether we know exactly what Declan Doyle's role was, they both know what that role was. And Ben obviously feels comfortable that Press can do it. And I also think that because of, regardless, the play calling and all this is kind of irrelevant because he's not going to have to do it. However, him being an offensive coordinator, an experienced offensive coordinator, whether it went well or not, being able to get in front of the room, he led offensive meetings. We did learn as you referenced, in San Francisco from Cole Kmet, that on Fridays and the Saturday walkthroughs, Declan Doyle took that over and was kind of leading those so that Ben can work on other things he needed to work on to get ahead for the game on Sunday. So, we kind of knowing that, it sounds like you feel confident that Press Taylor's going to be able to step into that role. And obviously Ben is confident. Otherwise he wouldn't have promoted him.
Yeah. And that's why I got tagged so many times from Jaguars fans of like, have fun with this. And I'm like, everybody just relax a little bit. And I think at the end of the day, I keep saying that, just trust Ben Johnson, because he hasn't done anything, especially with the staff he's built, to show us that we should have any hesitation, and the people he has, he's confident in being able to lead this. And I think the most important thing is just that relationship between Caleb. And also, you don't want Caleb to have to go through coaching staffs and different guys constantly. So it kind of works that he was in the building. He was already working closely in as that passing game coordinator. So you kind of have that comfortability still, rather than having another new offensive coordinator, even if he's not calling plays, working with your quarterback and trying to change things that maybe that had already been adjusted and were working last year.
Maybe I'm reaching a little bit here, but just from a simple math standpoint, they lost 2 coaches in the running back coach and the offensive coordinator, but they added 4 coaches. So I don't know if this speaks to what Declan Doyle was doing for this team, but it's simple math. And we talked about it. Press Taylor is the offensive coordinator. Isaiah Ford, former wide receiver, offensive quality control coach. And then Will Lawing is an offensive analyst. I know you had a chance to talk to Bill O'Brien, with your work you do on Windy City Gridiron. And it was a fantastic interview for any of you that haven't had a chance to go check that out, to kind of get an understanding of who Will Lawing is. But, after you kind of did your research and had that interview, and now we see exactly, because at the time we still didn't know what his role would be on this team. Now we know it's offensive analyst. I, for one, thought maybe he could be, after watching that interview, I was like, maybe he's the offensive coordinator for this team. So from your perspective and everything you've been doing behind the scenes, like how do you see Will Long fitting into this picture as well?
Yeah, one of the things that Bill O'Brien shared with me, Coach O'Brien, when I talked to him was, number one, they've been together for like 13 years. So they were together at Boston College most recently, which is where he came from. But they were together in Houston. They were together in New England. They had many stops. And so one of the things he shared with me is all of the different things that Will Long has done on coaching staffs when it comes to being most recently an offensive coordinator. But he's worked with tight ends, he's worked with wide receivers, he's worked with quarterbacks. He even had a year or two where he was on the defensive side of the ball and helped some of the defensive pieces. So I think just the angle when it comes to somebody like that, being able to add so many elements and experience, and so both college level and pro level, working with different types of quarterbacks. He also mentioned that, when Castellanos was the quarterback at Boston College before he went to Florida State, he's a mobile quarterback, uses his legs, does a lot of stuff out of the pocket. So he talked about his familiarity and being able to work with a quarterback like that and how he thinks it would work well with Caleb Williams. So all those things, to me, I agree. I kind of had this moment where I was like, oh, maybe this is kind of what they're seeing as they're testing the waters to see if this is who they want to be their offensive coordinator. Obviously, that didn't happen, but I do think somebody like this fits well with Caleb. I think fits well in this type of offense, has a lot of experience in just every side of the offense. But then you can also kind of have that unique view of have coaching a defense too, and kind of teach Caleb through the eyes of that side of things at times. So I think it'll work. I mean, you add all these pieces. There's clearly something there that they felt they wanted. They needed some more hands-on, maybe guys that can do specific things that maybe Declan Doyle was doing more than what we know. But I think it'll work. I think that this combination of guys, Isaiah Ford also, he's from Jacksonville. He went to one of the high schools here, Trinity Christian. So a lot of people in this town are familiar with him too. And he's super bright mind too. That's what everybody talks about him when it just comes to the way he sees the field and the way that he can coach. He hasn't coached yet, but he'd come back to Jacksonville and go back to Trinity and help at times. So I think it's a good staff. And I feel like I love what Ben Johnson's done both years. I feel like he's kind of instilled confidence in that light. And that's what you kind of want out of your head coach, is being able to actually trust and hope that they can do the right thing and not feel like things will fall apart because you lose a couple guys that get poached.
So since you are, so close to the Trevor Lawrence stuff and all this too, I'm curious just your perspective on following Caleb and following Trevor Lawrence, obviously different parts of their careers, but both number one overall picks. And, I think I reached a point in some point last season, probably in the middle of the season, where I was like, look, I think the floor for Caleb right now is to be in a Trevor-like situation where he already got his second contract, but, it's a constant discussion down there. It seems like, well, is this guy really, the long-term answer? I think I felt like that was the floor. And now we're sitting here after the playoffs, and I think Caleb's already surpassed Trevor. So but that's our view here from Chicago. So you're way closer to the Trevor Lawrence situation. How do you view essentially what I just said there and trying to, stack them?
Yeah, Trevor Lawrence has been, we always say he's just been inconsistent, very consistently inconsistent is what we say. But when he's good, he's really good. And that's what's kind of been frustrating, because you have these moments, which we saw from Caleb last year, those moments where you're like, man, there's something there, but can you pull it all together? Can you kind of stop making some of the errors that you need to? And a lot of factors in this. We know Caleb was sacked almost 70 times last year and he couldn't run the ball, and there's all those things. And Trevor's dealt with that. Trevor's dealt with back-to-back seasons with injuries where he was missing portions of time. And so it's always been hard to fully evaluate. And that's what's been most frustrating, is I feel like at the end of every offseason, we were like, well, we don't know still. Like at the end of last year, we don't know, is Trevor going to be the future? And we almost started to accept the fact that he's going to be really good at times, and you're just going to have to deal with having some bad games. You're going to have to deal with the turnovers. He had fumbling issues. He, in those 4 years, led the league in turnovers, and this year drastically changed that. But you just kind of started to accept that. Even up to probably week 7 or 8 this year, we were having conversations on air of being like, I guess this is just who he is. We're going to have to accept the fact that sometimes he's going to beat the Kansas City Chiefs and beat the Niners on the road. And then sometimes you're barely going to win a game against the Oakland Raiders because he throws a pick. And so you kind of started to accept that. And then he had the stretch of games at the end, especially probably the last 5 games, where he was just playing incredible football. And he looked like he was fully in control at the line of scrimmage. He was they put the wristband on. That's one thing that we noticed. So they gave him the wristband back in like week 8 or 9. And that's when things kind of started to shift. We joke about it where we're like, all right, like Trevor, wristband or no wristband, whatever that may be, it changed. And I don't know if he just started becoming more comfortable in the offense. They obviously traded for Jacoby Myers, and that kind of was just a little like puzzle piece that felt missing. But he looked so much more comfortable. It looked like his offense. And so with all that being said, we still have the conversations of, okay, well, he's done this in half a season's, at the end of 2022, at the beginning of 2023, and now at the end of 2025, but he's never put it all together for a full season. And that's the next step. Can he do that? Can he be a quarterback from week 1 to 18 and into the postseason that is somebody you can trust in and you want to lead your offense and have faith that in moments when you're down, he can pull you back out of it. That's what we have to see next year. You saw it in that final 5-6 game stretch, but now you got to see it for a full season. And I think with Caleb, it's more that, but kind of zoomed in. Can you do that for a full game? And that's what you don't want to keep having these games where it's like, okay, he can come back from the fourth quarter. You'd like some leads. You'd like them to score points sooner. And I saw Caleb on the Max Crosby podcast mentioned that, we got to get the ball rolling a little quicker in these games and score points. And he talked about that Peyton Manning record. And so I think that that's something we know. Caleb has goals. We know Ben Johnson has goals. And you have this whole off season now with these guys, with Luther Burden and Colston Loveland. And so this offense, it's just hard to me to not think that everything doesn't look even better next year and at a more consistent rate for Caleb.
Yeah, absolutely. They're going to score 60 touchdowns. It's going to be the greatest year of our lives. My final thing, and obviously you drew the Caleb and Trevor kind of comparisons. And I feel like, I think it's your fault that Jacksonville and Chicago have such a symmetry. Like I would never draw these connections, but every time I do, I think of you. And so I just have to assume that if you did not exist, I would not constantly be thinking about how alike the Jags and the Bears are, or at least the compare and contrast of these two organizations. Because even last year where both teams felt like they were trying to get Ben Johnson, then both teams, have this great, reclamation year with a head coach that's offensive minded, Liam Cohen and Ben Johnson. I think there's some comparisons there we could have gotten into, but I want to skip to ownership. Obviously everything in Chicago yesterday, the whole city, goes up for grabs because of the stadium news. There's obviously, a stadium you guys in Jacksonville are dealing with stadium news as well. Next year, you guys are going to a limited capacity. The year after that, it's going to be a completely different stadium while you guys built this state-of-the-art, $1.5 billion stadium, right? So I'm just curious from your perspective of covering both teams and the difference between how they've gone about trying to build their stadiums, and obviously the big difference between ownership of George McCaskey and Shad Khan in Jacksonville when you talk about people that are cash rich versus people that are trying to, get the state to help them pay for things.
Yeah. And it wasn't easy here. It was a lot of back and forth. There was a lot of, the proposal would come up and then the city would say no. And it'd be like, okay, it's going to be 50-40 split. Shad Khan this much and the taxpayers this much. And it was so back and forth for a while where it honestly felt like it wasn't going to happen. And then finally Shad Khan was like, okay, I'll pay half of this. And that's the benefit of having a multi-billionaire who he also has this isn't his, like the Jags are his baby in a sense, but he also owns a whole other company and a soccer team and all of these other things that he's getting money from.
He's got a giant boat.
Yeah. A massive yacht that he upgrades like every 2 years. And so I think that is a big part of it. I mean, Shad Khan was willing to just be like, all right, we need to get this done. So I'm going to fork out a large portion of this money to get the stadium done. Obviously there's the conversation, Florida property taxes and taxes in general and everything is not nearly what you have to deal with in Illinois. So that factors in. You don't have to deal, I think, as much with those little intricate things. The downtown needed it though. And I think that's one of the things that Shad Khan really wanted to focus on because Chicago is beautiful. Downtown Chicago, there's a million things to do. You could go every single weekend and still not touch every restaurant and bar that is in downtown Chicago. And so it's Jacksonville downtown's not like that. And I think that Shad Khan saw, okay, well, if I invest in a stadium that is investing in the city and downtown, and that's going to bring concerts and hopefully a Super Bowl. Again, that was a disaster last time, but all of these things, they want to build kind of facilities around it, and that's adding jobs, and they're building a Four Seasons now on the river. And so there's all these things that I think Shad Khan was like, okay, well, I'm investing in a stadium, but I'm investing in a lot more beyond that. And that's what he is. He's a businessman. He loves his companies. He likes spending his money and making money. And I think that was a large part of it. I think the Jags did it right in the sense of we'll be limited capacity next year, probably play in Orlando for a year, and then come back and your stadium's done and you're good to go. It's also very hot at games. And so they knew they needed some sort of indoor shading or something because fans didn't want to go in September. It was just miserable. And so that's some of the things. If you want butts and seats, then make it more comfortable and make fans want to be there and make it a full day experience rather than just like, hey, let's go watch the Jags when it's 105 degrees outside.
Yeah. Oh, we're so sorry. It's so warm and hot there when it's 9 degrees for the Bears playoff game.
Yeah.
Taylor, you're the best. Thank you so much for joining us. Fun talking to a lot of these Jaguars Bears connections. Always good having you on. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.